everybody, and thanks for joining us. Welcome back to our series here with Parallaxis on podcasts. Today, we have quite a large panel with us. We have Alex Kalinovsky, who is the Chief Technical Officer here at Parallaxis. We have Mr. Paul Karsten, Chief Delivery Officer here at Parallaxis. We have Greg Pearman. We're going to refer to him as Hap. He's a Director of Engineering here with us. And joining us also is Dan Chernoff. He is all things data. He has a master's degree from Notre Dame University. As we said in the last one, if you have not seen Rudy, the movie, you really need to go and check that out. Just pause it right now. We'll be here 2 hours from now and you can unpause it, but check it out. And so we're going to go ahead and get started today. We're going to have a panel discussion on data fitness. And so not to belay things, we're going to kick it off to you, Alex, for the first question. So I want to kind of define fit for purpose. The term data fitness inherently means data is fit for its intended purpose. In your experience, what would you say are the most critical, maybe often overlooked, the factors in determining if data in an organization is actually fit for purpose, and how organizations can actually, assess this across, diverse business units and data types?
So I'll start with a very practical, kind of in my view, very practical answer. If somebody is implementing AI or machine learning, they probably have a question they want answered or a particular business objective. And so data is fit for purpose if it helps answer that question. And it's not fit for purpose if it's not. And that's a fairly common issue. People think they have the data to support whatever they're doing. And one of the challenges of many projects is it's not. Because never collected it, data was never, people did business to do business, not to collect data traditionally, right? So never collected the data. It was an afterthought, legacy systems that didn't collect data in a way that would support what people are trying to do now. So does data answer the question that you're posing to the machine?
Cool, good insights. Paul, Dan, anything or Hap, anything to add?
No, I agree with what Alex said.
That's cheating. Yeah, right. So if you're asking about, I don't know, you want to analyze your invoices and you have dates and amounts but no customer, or you have customer and amounts but no dates, you can't really answer the question you're trying to ask. What we see a lot is we ask people for their data and we'll be thrown over to go over there and talk to this person. And there's some massive extract of data that was created who knows when, for who knows what purpose. And you're trying to then answer some questions and find very rapidly that you don't have the right attributes to answer the question. And I think that's really, when we're talking about fitness, that's kind of what we're looking at.
I think you'll
agree.
also, sorry, go ahead.
I agree with everything you said, but I think there's more gradation in is it fit or not. The purpose of ML is to be able to answer a question like Alex said, but you should also be able to answer a question better than or faster than you could do it as a human, right? Otherwise, there's no purpose in doing ML or doing the automation. So we also need to look at, is the data fit for purpose, and is it of sufficient quality that it will give us the answers that we're looking for better than a subject matter expert. And that also allows you to be able to know, what are my gaps? What are the additional things that we need from a governance or process point of view to ensure that we've captured the data that we need to answer the question with sufficient quality that it's of benefit to our customers or our teams.
I think where I see this really get very interesting when you talk like you just did about whether it answered the question or not is the business will start to disagree. They have different perceptions across the business sometimes about what the right answer is and whether the data answers that correctly. So that then leads to some really interesting discussions as well as to, what does a customer even mean? What does an employee mean? What does, certain aspects of the data? And we start to see some real variations. And I think you have to really then at that point start getting the business to get into alignment.
So in ML, Greg, and I agree with everything that you said. So the data has to have the answer in it in order to use it for AI training. That you can have the data, but something within the data has to be able to say that This record tells me that this is a cat. This record tells me that this is a dog. And that you need to be able to point to that before you start training your model, because that's how the model will learn. Is this element of that category? Is it of this group? Or with this prediction, our housing prices will be $200,000 within a confidence interval.
I get worried that people get hung up on data quality, Dan, and spend a lot of time worrying about the quality of the data when, especially early on, the analysis needs to be, do I have the right data? I'm not worried so much about it being clear and clean and consistent. Do I just have it? And what kind of data do I have? And begin doing some initial level analysis on what you can get to see, does it even have the attributes that I need? Okay, if it's beautiful and clean but it doesn't have my attributes, then I don't care. If it has my attributes but it's not clean, well, okay, so you data scientist types can throw in some linear algebra and we can do some fitting, right.
Yeah, ish. It's not a yes or a no. It's not a yes or no question, and which I know you love. Does the data that you have the attributes that you would use to make a decision on? Awesome. What's the amount of missing data for those attributes? Goes back to quality. So even though the data structures may have the attributes or the relationships or the whatnot, if the data isn't of sufficient quality, then it still can't answer the question good enough to make it better than a human going and doing it, which is the bar, which is a common bar that we should be aiming at.
So I just figured like practical example, right? So say you want to do like everybody wants to come up with the best price to win a deal, right? So let's say somebody is implementing a model that's supposed to give their salespeople a best price to quote to a customer for whatever they're selling, right? And let's say they have historic data on all the transactions they've done, but what they don't have, for example, is win-loss data. So that, to me, that's you don't have the data. It's not even a missing. You never collected it. So we can say the data is not of sufficient quality because that element is missing, but you've never collected the data in the first place. You just don't have it.
My response to that is, can I get the data? So if you, let's say you didn't collect it up front, but if you want to implement ML and in your use case, could you provide a human in the loop to go do that categorization to enhance that data set with enough data to be able to do that? So back to Paul's point, many people can get hung up on the data quality, and I think that's an excellent point. But you don't have to have perfect data if you can go back and then modify it. The thing that you have to ensure is that if you are doing that human tailoring, human updating review, that you have a process to now go capture that data going forward systematically.
Okay. It's good conversation. Let me jump in. I'm actually going to go to one that kind of talks about the human element in that. And I'm going to kind of based on what you said, Dan, I'm going to throw this question to you to begin with. So it's the human element in data fitness. So you guys talked about, is data fit for purpose? Do we have the data? But beyond tools and technologies, what would you say? What role does organizational culture, data literacy, clear ownership of the data, et cetera, play in achieving and maintaining data fitness? And if you have any, could you share any examples of how kind of a data first mindset has tangibly improved data in any organizations you've been a part of?
I'm not going to get on my pulpit and talk about data mesh as the one true way, but I think the mindset of treating data as a product, treating data as a first class citizen, as part of your application structure really drives that data first mindset. And teams that do that inherently have better quality data because they're packaging it, they're versioning it, they're able to describe it, they have data dictionaries, they have all of those things. Whereas teams that just treat data as a byproduct and a thing you kind of use to understand your customers a little bit don't really have good quality data. And the reason that data mesh plays into that is data mesh treats data as a first-class citizen. It expects it to be packaged as a product or delivered as a product, where your traditional data lakes, your data with lake houses, your data swamps, whatever the cool kids are calling it these days, ends up just usually becoming a dumping ground, and it becomes very difficult to get that quality data and then understand what that data actually is. So from a human point of view, it's implementation of those governance practices and then applying quality through the process of generating and storing and pipelining your data.
I would just maybe
I think
add
another,
like the the human element of it, because treating data as a product then implies that there's somebody who owns it. And if there's somebody who owns it, then they care about it, because in the situations where nobody owns it, it's not really clear. There's no clear ownership, then obviously nobody cares about it, and it becomes not fit, bad quality, and all of the above. But that approach then that you described implies that there's somebody who cares about it the same way as a product owner cares about the software you're developing, same or maybe different, but they care about data as a product, and they feel ownership of it.
You really want me to give a sermon on data mesh, don't you? The part the part of the part of treating data as a product and part of data mesh is pushing the ownership of that data to the teams that own and generate it, pushes and enables that local ownership of the data and then publishing it for other teams to be able to use.
and I think the other key aspect in there is you need that human in the loop to do the validation, right? You want to make sure after you've collected the data, built the models, and started to run some analysis that somebody from a human standpoint has gone and verified that those are kind of like the right, correct answers, and the system is not hallucinating or giving you false indicators about what's going on. And you really need that piece of it in that puzzle to be able to do the refinement.
Yes, but so I think what you're driving towards is your subject matter expertise, your ability to interpret what the data actually means, right? You have 500 rows and 2 million, sorry, 2 million rows and 500 columns of data. What are the relationships of the data? What does the interpretation of the data actually mean? And then as you have the models generate inference, what does that inference actually mean? And is the inference right? Up front, all of that work should be done by humans because they're the subject matter experts. But over time, you should use things like basic math and statistics and then bake metrics into the type of models that you're using. So traditional models would use things like RMSE if I'm doing a prediction on numbers, or use recall if I'm doing categorization. Really simple things to be able to tell, is the model accurate or not, or does it need to be retrained, which then falls on to, if the model's accurate, is it achieving the business goal? And then what are the metrics that you're wrapping around the business goal to make sure that the model is driving the business in the correct way?
Let me go ahead and ask one more question on this. So we talked about, making sure the data is fit for purpose. Earlier, Alex talked about making sure the kind of a business value. Somebody who's looking to get into, data foundations and AI might sound like this is a lot of work. I'm going to spend a lot of money just to get data in the right spot. So I want to talk a little bit about, the return on investment of data fitness initiatives. So, it sounds like it can require significant resources. How, in your view, could organizations effectively measure, the ongoing health and fitness of their data assets, but more importantly, how can they demonstrate or know tangible ROI and business value derived from what seems like might be, maybe significant, maybe not, but an upfront investment? I didn't really throw that to anybody, so go ahead and figure out whoever wants to grab
I,
that one.
I'm going to jump in and I'm going to reinforce something that Alex said at the very beginning. It's understanding the question of interest. And when you define that question of interest, you define how it moves the business. If I could know X, I would be able to do Y, which would enable me to do Z. If my salespeople could know within 5% accuracy of what the quotes are, I could drive more business, and my return on investment or my increase in sales would be Z or whatever it is. That allows you to have tangible business outcomes to the models that you are trying to implement, and that tells you whether or not it's actually supporting the business. You step that back to the specific model metrics that you've implemented, and those become early indicators of whether or not you're achieving the business goals. But everything in ML, everything in AI always comes back to either the data or if you have a, formed a good question of interest.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that, Dan. Right? I mean, I don't think there's a metric per se on fitness that you're tracking. It goes back, as you said, Dirk, to the business value. Why am I doing this? You have to ask the question and make some assumption about why you're asking the question, and then drive the metrics from there as I'm achieving that goal. So, start small, add complexity to any kind of solution set you're doing. As you go along the way, you'll find the things that you have to fix, but it's all got to be focused on the increase in sales or decrease in costs or whatever the ROI is.
Okay.
I would just one thing I want to add to that is at the very least, you should know what the quality, if you've never invested in a data quality, but you're about to invest in a AI enabled product, which it seems like almost all of them now are. You want to do, your own AI or ML project, which is great. And let's say you have you have a business case, you have a business objective. At the very least, you should know. First thing you should figure out what the quality is your data fit and what quality it's in, and you should do it at the beginning of the project because then you might be saving yourself millions of dollars, right? Whereas if you don't do it and you find out when you're far down the road that it's not, and you have a failed project with a lot of money invested. The stats, if you talk to various software vendors these days or look at Gartner, 80% of implementations fail. And the reason is the data that's not fit of bad quality. So at the very least, people owe it to themselves to invest and figure out first at the beginning of a project state of the data.
Okay. And just one more question for this panel. So putting on, if there's, a CEO or somebody, watching this, they're going to say, I understand, the governance around this and how data fitness needs, data fitness, data governance, all this has to be there. But I'm worried about agility as well. So I don't want to get bogged down in the governance aspects of things. I still have a business to run. I still have a very, rapid innovation cycle. How, in you guys' view, how do you balance the two? How do you balance the need for, the governance of data, making sure it's fit for purpose, but also the agility of business needs, to run their day-to-day operations?
Data mesh.
Thank you, Alex. I
I,
I
I,
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 I
I think another important aspect, kind of tailoring in on that, is well, if you've already tried this and you lost a lot of money because you didn't get the results, that was because you didn't set all those priorities up and think about those things. And that right there is a big indicator. As Alex kind of point, you're going to lose millions of dollars by doing it that way. So I think that's something to really keep in mind as you start out kind of on that journey.
Well, the thing we always run into is, Conway's law. Your data is structured the way your organization is structured, and sometimes the questions you're asking go across some of those boundaries, and now you're fighting across that boundary set to be able to collect the information that you need. So I think it's a combination of things, Dirk. Is that you've got to be ready to challenge and change the way that you're thinking about running your day-to-day business in order to be able to answer some of these questions. It's going to bring you the value.
And governance, there's governance and there's governance. You can have a very heavy centralized governance, which usually doesn't lead to agility, or you can have product ownership. You can have decentralized governance where the governance is pushed down to where the data is produced, to where the system, coming back to the idea of data products, right? So have the framework, have the governance, but decentralize implementation of that governance to some degree, right? And that's where we talk about communities of practice and all the other things, but decentralize. Otherwise, we're going to start doing sermon to data mesh now. But decentralize your governance to achieve agility, have the framework and guardrails in place, but then decentralize the governance.
Yeah, it's supportive. It's not, dictatorial. It's not authoritative. It is really about putting in the right guardrails to get you to where you need to go.
And I also think it's an evolutionary process. I think that there's the stating that there's a choice is a false choice. That as you get started, your governance and your process may be a little manual. Covering yourself with governance, understanding where your data is, having it cross the organizational boundaries that Paul was talking about can be challenging at first. But as you grow and as you mature, you begin to build your automation and you align your governance to the automation. And now you have automated governance, which helps with the quality, it helps with consolidation or use across boundaries. So I don't think it's a choice. I think it's where you're at in your journey.
Okay, interesting. Well, thanks, guys. That's about 20 minutes, and I appreciate your insights. Anybody who's watching this, if you want to hear more or talk to these folks, you can. Please visit, parallaxis.ai. Lots of other blog articles out there, other podcasts out there, if this piqued your interest. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for the panelists for being here as well. And we'll all see you on the next episode.